Okay, so it's a little tricky always coming. This is our third meeting, second on anxiety, or okay. So as someone who's trying to deliver the content and information, it's always tricky when you don't know if people were here last time. So I don't want to leave anyone in confusion or leave people behind, that sort of thing. And I'm not even sure, are there people streaming yet? Not yet. Not to me. Okay. So what this is idea, okay, what we're talking about, let's make it very clear so I don't have to go through all the previous slides. Um, Many people don't know. I think maybe everyone here knows. Oh, can't ask it that way. How many people here have taken Buddhist teachings before? See, that's why you ask it. So you don't embarrass the people. I mean, so the idea here is that, just to remind those who know and maybe inform those who don't, the Buddhist philosophy or set of teachings is actually mostly on psychology. And I think that's really refreshing. Now, we got to get that word out to people who don't know. Because I think just about everyone, I mean, that's exaggeration, but people are very interested in psychology, much more so than they're interested in religion, I would say. Religion's a little bit of a weighted word these days. But if you talk about psychology, I think people are fascinated. And then the other hand is when we talk about psychology, people will think, of course, normally modern psychology, Western psychology. And really think about it, modern psychology is quite new, isn't it? It's supposedly a science. Freud designed it to be a science when he first started. I guess he was like the first person to start psychology, modern psychology. And he actually, the motivation for him to make it a science, it was because he wanted to be considered legitimate in Switzerland, or was it Austria? Austria. So the community of professional experts around those times, where the medical field was developing, science was developing, and he really wanted psychology to be regarded as something valuable, credible amongst the scientific community. It's had trouble since then, and it still has trouble in some ways in the medical scientific community. But it's also partly because it's still a new science. However, in the Buddhist tradition, over almost 2,600 years, they have been discussing and developing the idea of psychology. It's the central theme, I would say, of Buddhism, which is amazing. And we think about it. The central theme is um, how to be happy. And so we could say that's probably the theme maybe in terms of modern psychology too, or anything, right? But it's very clear in Buddhist psychology, Buddhist theory, Buddhist practice that the whole corpus of teachings, all the tens of thousands of teachings that exist, really for the sole purpose to be happy. So how some of us are really like the academic side, we like the intellectual side, we like studying and reading, or some people like the ritual side, or some people like the meditation side, and forget why all of those practices, those teachings, those philosophies, why they exist. We get very caught up. It's the reason we get caught up is because we are material beings. We are beings that are sort of caught up in how we see the world and believing the world exists as it appears. And so if we're a business person, then we might approach these ideas from a business perspective. I'm talking about a mindset, not a business person, but having a mindset of business. If someone's, I don't know, devotional, then they'll come to the point of view of entering the Buddhist ideas from a devotional point of view. I mean, whatever way we make sense of the world, we come into Buddhist thought with the same mindset. Over time, it'll change because that's the idea. Yeah. So the problem, as it's described in Buddhist teachings, is that our normal mindset is the problem. So going back to basics, if the idea is that every moment is spent to be happy, think about that. So not a very profound thought until you wrestle with that. There's not a moment that goes by, actually. Not even a moment, thank you, that goes by. We could have a discussion about this. Is there any moment that goes by where maybe every living being is not looking to be happy? do you think? Bold statement. Generalization. Everyone knows I do all these generalized statements. And come on. Any argument? What do you think? How about people who commit suicide? They're not trying to be happy, right? How about people cut, themselves? What's their motivation? You guys are really quiet. Is it to be? I'm just saying, you got to agree or disagree. Who disagrees? I guess no one disagrees. Darn. Even when we put our shoes on, it's to be happy. Even we're sitting here at this moment, if you really, not just analyze, but if you just really open your mind to your experience, this moment. Remember, that's what mindfulness practice is all about, right? It is, our being is seeking to be happy. Just sitting here. And avoid unhappiness. And how do we define those? We'll define them, right? Okay. So, this is just an introduction, right? So the idea around this is that if every moment is lived with the intent to be happy, right? You know what the problem with that is? It must imply that we're not happy. And when people start looking at Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy, and they come across the very first teaching that Buddha gave, which is the Four Noble Truths, and the first truth being the truth of suffering, people really react, don't they? I mean, it's not like something they go, oh yeah, I mean, not generally speaking. But if you just say, well, isn't everyone trying to be happy? Isn't all they want is happiness? And people can get to that place pretty quickly. Well, if you're trying to be happy, doesn't it mean you're not happy? Logically? That's what Buddha meant by truth of suffering. Okay, it's very profound, but it's not that complicated. It's subtle, but it's not complicated. Do you know what I mean? Subtle, but not complicated. Okay? Maybe like some art. Some art is subtle, but not complicated. We can make it complicated. Okay? And we do. So, why don't we know it? This is really weird, though. Isn't it kind of weird that every living being is seeking happiness, but then no one's really achieving it? I mean, there's someone, but I mean, majority are not achieving it. Does anyone stop seeking it? Doesn't seem like it, right? No. It's just like we're wired that way. Okay, so talking about the wiring, that's psychology. Okay? Now, maybe I made a leap there. So from the Buddhist point of view, and looks at it, and you analyze, when we analyze, then it comes down to the mind. Okay? It comes down to the mind is the thing that's seeking happiness, and the mind is a thing that's involved in unhappiness. And that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of time to analyze, by the way. That's not that easy. We can say it. But then immediately we go, can't wait till we're going to get dinner after this talk. When we say that, that's old default mode of wanting happiness. Thinking it's in the food that we're going to eat. Okay, so that's how things are. That's our kind of a habit. So we did say, so we're talking about anxiety again. Anxiety. And it's really good for the next little while we're talking. It's really important to get in touch with your anxiety. Okay? I'm going to make a guess that everyone has some anxiety at some time. Is that fair to say? Anybody just doesn't struggle with anxiety ever? Doesn't know what it is? Okay. I guess not. That's a good topic then, huh? So, actually the topic of anxiety is very good. So when we're looking at, I gotta see what my next, So so this is not a Western modern psychology class, but we have to be relevant, right? We are modern people. And when we talk about anxiety, modern psychology, psychotherapy does wrestle with anxiety. The funny thing is, we just talk about anxiety as if we all know what it is. Okay, I think the first class, last week I gave some definition of anxiety, not last week, last class, a definition of anxiety. Does anyone, I don't remember. I don't have that, it's somewhere here. But just going a little bit further, the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that psychologists or psychiatrists and therapists use to diagnose. So if we're going to say he has or she has anxiety or an anxiety disorder, it's from the definition within the DSM-5 or 5 now. Okay? So we're not when I talk about, as we go further into this, I'll talk about more the common use of the word anxiety, okay? But just so that we know that it's a very predominant section within the DSM-5, and a lot of diagnoses are given for people with anxiety disorders. It's quite common. Probably one of the more common ones, like depressive disorders, another common one. Okay, so this doesn't include depression. These are just different ways that in the DSM-5 that they articulate it so that you receive I didn't put the diagnosis numbers next to them, but if a client, you're dealing with someone, you're thinking about yourself, you want a modern diagnosis, then you look here and you read about these things, and you're going to fall into one of these, such as separation anxiety disorder. Okay. Selective mutism. Okay, that means you choose, due to anxiety, to not speak. Okay, your anxiety drives you not to speak. This can happen I think it happens people have to give presentations and stuff like that. I don't know. I have to look that. It's interesting. Social anxiety disorder, that's pretty familiar. We know that. Okay. Now, what all these anxiety, why they're disorders, is because they impede people's normal functioning. So it's not just nervousness. Okay. In fact, a lot of these, again, not to spend too much time with it, you have to have it for 6 months. You have to have it for 1 month. It's not like a panic attack is one of the few that are up there. That's, one instance. You can have a panic attack and get one panic attack, nothing leading up to it, and still receive the disorder or the diagnosis. Okay. Agoraphobia, okay, which is like fear of going outside or fear of crossing bridges and that sort of thing. Being in open spaces, you get very anxious because the mental experience is anxiety. That's what we have to understand. So if someone goes outside or goes and gets depressed being outside, that wouldn't fit for. I don't know. I have to look at it more closely. It might still be, there might be agoraphobic, depressive features. I don't know. Anxiety or due to another medical condition, right? You get anxiety because something is happening to you medically. That's not uncommon, right? Generalized anxiety disorder, which is also can be substance induced, okay, illegal or legal, and then other specified anxiety disorder and unspecified anxiety. See, they keep themselves covered, right? And someone comes and says, "I have anxiety," and they can't fit them into one of these boxes, and you get the unspecified anxiety disorder. Then they can claim on their insurance, and they get reimbursed. Most of this is for insurance. I mean, sometimes for assessment, but, of course, like a psychiatrist will do a diagnosis to prescribe the right meds, but. Okay, so that's enough of that? Yeah.
There's an online question, and the question is, what is happiness? I mean, what's the Buddhist definition of happiness?
Okay. That was recorded. So, there's a book written, I can't remember who it was written by, but someone who was teaching. This is terrible when you don't know the whole references. It's a book called Happier. Anyone know that book? Interesting. It was based upon some professor's class that he was teaching. Again, I don't remember. Excuse me, it's been a while. But anyway, and you know, it was a normal university class. He decided to teach on happiness, and I think they had 100 spaces, and regularly there were 1,200 applications for his class. And then eventually he wrote a book about it. And I just, the only thing I remember, I don't read whole books, so that's part of the problem. It seems like you read the first couple of chapters, it's usually often enough. Sorry. But I remember, I think I just don't have good concentration, but I remember the main point of it was that he found that there was not a state of, and this is a modern scientific approach, there wasn't a state of happiness, but there was a state of happier and happier and happier and happier and happier. Okay? So that's not the whole definition. That's talking from modern Western point of view. In terms of Buddhist idea of happiness, it's a great question. So we have to analyze, we have to look at what is unhappiness. We have to know, and that's what the first noble truth of suffering, we have to know, well, what is that? And then we'd say the happiness is in a sense the opposite of that. So not to be too obtuse, and to be really brief, the whole Buddhist teachings are designed around that question, really. So it's something it is elusive. It's not something we possess. We don't possess actively. So happiness, in one way of describing it, is there's levels of it within the Buddhist tradition. So the first level I would say is balance. Okay, so it's very important. It's all there's all mental stuff. Okay, it's all mental. So happiness is a mental state. It's the absence. It's the absence of agitation. It's the absence of. It's not the absence of desire exactly. It's the absence of grasping, of being driven. And really what it is, 100%, you can think of also, happiness is control. Control is always usually a bad thing. And sometimes it's talked about in a bad way. But here, happiness is, the opposite of happiness is that we are under the control of our disturbing emotions, our afflictive emotions, our mental disorders. And it just, if you spend a little time thinking, so it's easy to say what unhappiness is. Happiness is the absence of those things. Interesting, isn't it? Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it's just the absence of them. It's like this space exists, it's the absence of obstructive content, but content, here, right? There's no obstruction right here, but we know there's space exists. So the same way as happiness, it's the absence of these disturbing, afflictive emotions that run us. And we have to become very honest, and we have to practice. It's not, we actually can't, mind training is the main form of therapy in Buddhist psychology. Mind training, because why? Because these afflictive emotions run the mind, we don't run them. It's really very sad situation, actually. So every one of us has experienced different levels of happiness, whatever you want to call it. And the problem is the absence of control. So even we say, I'm going to decide, okay, let's all decide together. How many of us are going to decide from now, not too long, but now until this time tomorrow night, we're all going to be happy? Why not? Isn't that interesting? What I mean by happy, just for the person, not get angry. So see, anger is agitation. Your mind gets agitated. Okay, that's good. Really excitement, like overly giddy and excited, disturbs the mind. People might say, well, God, that's pretty much of a downer. Why can't we just be like giddy or pleasurable all the time? Because you can't. Philosophically and logically, and we can go into it, why you can't. That's not actually a possibility. Because these emotions, whether they're positive, because there's positive emotions, or negative, are changeable. And they're always changeable, and until we get rid of our... So the happiness comes from an absence of ignorance. Ignorance means seeing things incorrectly. So I think that new job I'm going to get, I don't know, is going to make me happy. That's a natural thing to do. That's based upon ignorance. That's not going to make you happy because it's not lasting. The job might last your whole life, but your relationship to your job, to the emotions around the job, are changeable. Okay? So people might say, well, if I had a house, could have my own house, I'd be happy. But it doesn't work, does it? Why? They have the same house for their whole life, maybe. Do they stay happy? It doesn't mean that not having a house is not a good thing. Of course it's a good thing. It's about the relationship. Okay, the relationship is, I see clients frequently, right? And it's tough because clients will say, well, I just need a girlfriend. It's funny because one client said, but she has to be beautiful. Yeah. No, he's very serious. She has to be beautiful. I said, well, because I'm really not very compassionate. Because I said, well, what if she's a really nice person, but she's not beautiful? And he kind of thought about it. No, she has to be beautiful, too. But see, I said to him, but she's beautiful. Even if she's beautiful, do you know? That's not sustainable, is it? Right? I mean, it's the nature of the body changes. So if you don't think of the beauty as internal or having to do with the quality of the person, that sort of thing, then you're in trouble. Because everything rots. Even that house that you want. This is someone's supposed to come up till many slides later. Anyway, I hope I answered so about the happiness, this is the sort of sad thing. Even though it's sort of our right to be happy, it doesn't just come. This is really kind of sad. We have to train in happiness. And that doesn't mean training in, web design, to be the best web designer. It doesn't mean training in nursing, to be a great nurse. It doesn't mean training in anything like that, which we train hard for. It means training in this mind that's so flip-floppy. So when we can control the mind, we will be happy. And then that leads to big questions like, what does that mean, control? Like this, you mean? No, the control thing is what all the practice is about, right? And that's a bigger question. Okay? Okay? So there you go. I hope I did that. So Dalai Lama is fond of this quote from Shantideva. Shantideva was the 8th century, one of the most regarded Buddhist philosophers, contemplatives, saints in the Tibetan or in the Mahayana tradition. If the problem can be solved, why worry? If the problem cannot be solved, worrying will do you no good. So that's actually a very complicated, simple but complicated saying. If the problem can be solved, why worry? But we still do, right? Why? If the problem cannot be solved, worrying will do you no good.
Well, I'm thinking it's usually because of fear of the unknown.
Okay, so fear of the unknown. If the problem can be solved, why worry? Do you mean for that part or the second part? Fear of the unknown. So let's give me an example what one might be worrying about.
Is my son or daughter going to have a great job?
Is my son or daughter going to have a great job? Okay. So is that a problem you can solve?
No.
Oh. And we work, I'm a parent too, of course we worry about, so we worry.
Yes.
So fear of the unknown. So it's interesting, isn't worry kind of a habit?
Yes.
So when we worry, if the problem cannot be solved, worrying will do you no good. Why do we worry then? I mean, we know that intellectually, but what really gets us, we're going to get to this, by the way. I'm going to help you answer that soon. But isn't that amazing? So going back to the earlier question online, because you don't have control, right?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
I don't have control.
Ah.
I was just going to say that, Karuna.
I was right. I was right. So you see, so that's interesting. So just stop. Just stop worrying, okay? Why can't we do that? We don't have control. But this is actually very helpful. It does help. Do other people think about this who have heard this saying before? It helps, doesn't it? I mean, it helps to retrain your mind. So this is mind training. Our mind is trained. A very close friend of mine, his mother was, actually she had lived to 103 maybe or something. And, she had dementia set in, I don't know, when she's probably about 90, in her 90s, something. Yeah. Well, when we were, one day I don't know where they were, but I think she was sitting in the car next to him, and they were having a kind of a good time. Maybe in the restaurant, having a good, he'd just take her to restaurants and take her out and like that. And they were kind of in a very sort of content place. And all of a sudden she got agitated. And he said to her, he says, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she said, "Shouldn't I be worrying about something?" See, that's different than caring about something, right? Shouldn't it's almost like they seem like the same. If you care about something, you worry about it. If you care about your children, you worry about it. So it's some lack of control, then we want to control, and then we get worried. But that's another emotion might be more helpful than worry. Right? Like compassion, like care, like warmth, like empathy. Those are more useful than worrying. Worrying doesn't do anything. Lama Yeshe used to say, worrying wastes time. Because it disempowers you. Right? But we do it. And that's the psychology part. Hopefully we can get to it. I'll quote this in a moment. Let's see where we're going. Yeah, the root, I read this recently, I don't know if it's true, because I didn't have time to look it up, but it says the root word of anxiety means to constrict or to squeeze. And if you ask people who have anxiety or who are worrying, yes, and where do you feel it in your body? It's, my chest is squeezed. Sometimes you feel it in your stomach, but a lot of times people say it's squeezed, or my head feels just so squeezed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm just worried about. Right? Isn't that interesting? Anxiety means to constrict or to squeeze. But that translates in Buddhist psychology and philosophy as grasping and clinging. Okay, so we also agree it's about squeezing. Lama Yeshe used to always say, don't squeeze, especially when you're meditating. He says, I look at my students, they're like this. Squeezing and meditate. Squeezing. You ever find yourself squeezing when you meditate? Yeah? So they talk about in meditation, about it's like a guitar. You tune it, the strings not too tight and not too loose. I think he felt that probably us modern people, maybe we tune too tight, because we're very... somehow in our culture, and the culture is a broad word, but somehow we're very ambitious and very, aren't we? It's very about achievement. Try working in Nepal someday. They don't have that same idea, and they get it, but it's not in their DNA. It's changing. Their DNA is changing over time, but it's just not in their DNA, and. Yeah, that's not their highest value. We get recruited into that being, right, for many of us, as being the biggest value in this modern culture is achieving. And a lot of times they say, like achieving the American dream, or achieving a good job, or achieving wealth, or, right? We're just taught this stuff without really questioning. And actually in many cultures, traditional cultures, that's not the highest value. Community is a bigger value. It's not really a good example, but I know I was fascinated by Australia, which my wife's Australian, and if you're really successful, make a lot of money, like there, they really cut you down if you show it too much. They don't like ostentation. Like here, you're allowed to, like, I don't know. It's so weird. People can be all ostentatious and extravagant, and people maybe inside are jealous, right? But generally say, oh yeah, he's great. He's achieved, he's achieved success, his American dream. But many cultures, I think European might be similar. They don't hold the same regard, do they? Not in Australia anyway. They'll cut you down eventually. Yes.
Going back to the grasping and clinging.
Like that monkey? Did you see the monkey?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So does that also go with attachment, being attached to things and people?
So it's exactly the same.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes they're not considered exactly synonyms, but for our purpose, there are synonyms right now. So the way the mind works, you see, with anxiety, I think I go into that a little more, but the way it works is a thought comes up. So it might be something simple. It's like you're talking to your children on the phone, and then one of them says, yeah, I've been looking for work, but I just can't. Nothing's coming up. I had that interview, thought it was going to went well, but they didn't call me back. Right? And then maybe worry could come up. Okay. So this happens in every instance. So you think about your own example of when you get anxious, worry, fear. And if you look at it closely, what happens is do you have a daughter or son or both? Both. Okay, so let's say your daughter's talking to you on the phone, right? And saying that. Oh, and saying that. So what happens psychologically is an image arises within your mind. You don't even know it. But it's a mental image that comes into the mind based upon just the sound of her voice and a few words. They're nothing but atoms, are they? They don't have, it's not from the side of the worry is not in the words. They're just neutral, aren't they? So where does the worry come from? When you are listening, and if I'm listening, we're both listening, right? To your daughter, and all of a sudden you go like that, right? But I don't do that. Why?
Because you've had more practice than me.
No, I don't know about that. Because we're hearing the same words, aren't we?
Yes.
So if it was in the words, then I should feel the anxiety as much as you. Right?
Well, not really.
Why? Where's the anxiety? Where's the worry? Where's the worry part? In the fact that she's not finding a job? We'd say that. Even people even say, oh, anyone would be upset, right? People say that. Oh, she's been looking for 6 months. She hasn't found work. She might be homeless soon, I know. Oh, anyone would worry about that. That's what we say. Don't we?
Yeah, but it's not my problem.
Right, but where's the worry? Where's the anxiety really? So we would say the anxiety, without thinking, I mean, you got to go with, just sort of spontaneous and naturally by default. She told me she couldn't find work, and then your friend says, oh yeah, I'd worry about that too. Oh yeah, that's really right. If my daughter, right, people feed that description, and it's not that helpful.
No, it's not.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's great your daughter doesn't find work. That's not the point. The point is the emotion of anxiety and worry. So we think that anyone would worry about that, as if the emotion of worry exists in her voice of not finding work. Right?
Yes.
Or you got to give a talk, you got to do that presentation, you have to present your thesis tomorrow. Oh, everyone worries about that, right? When you have to present that. As if always amongst the people listening, the worry exists. What if you're not worried? That's kind of weird, huh? It's considered strange for people not to be anxious about that, or public speaking. You're not worried about public, you must be like narcissistic or something. Right? And then people will say, I think you're weird. Or if you're not worried about the political situation. That's why we're talking about anxiety, right? I forgot. I have to be so careful because I'll try to be careful. But the political situation, I mean, doesn't matter what side you're on. You know, people are really anxious, aren't they? Or is it just some people, just one side? I think everyone's anxious. You know, so people, and this is where you got to be courageous. You know, it's not the anxiety, the worry, the concern is not Trump's fault, is not the Republicans' fault, is not the Democrats' fault. That's how we think. And then you listen to the news shows that feed your bias, and then you go, yeah, see, there it is because of all that stuff. I mean, I don't like it either, by the way. But the point is, I have to be accountable. You know, I have to be accountable. And when we decide to be happy, we got to be accountable. And when you listen to whoever you listen to, and you see whatever you see, and you get angry, and you get or you get fearful, or you get anxious, right? Or you get vengeful, that's a disturbed mind. Your mind, our mind, is disturbed. That's not happiness. So I want to be happy. So then I have to look at that. I got to confront that, right? I have to confront those emotions that are arising. It's not Trump. It's my disturbing emotions that are the problem. You have to be accountable. It doesn't mean you accept like that. You know, like I accept, like if Hitler were alive, it doesn't mean you accept what he's doing. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about our emotional state. And by the way, this is not just about being selfish and me being happy. It's about being effective. Because we can't actually be effective if we don't have wisdom and compassion. But this compassion I'm talking about is compassion with wisdom, not the compassion that's, you know, emotional. That's not what we mean by compassion. Okay, this is compassion based upon wisdom. And so if I am getting so upset by the situations, I can't generate any idea. It's not why. It's not based on wisdom. It's based on ignorance. And we can talk about that more next time, I think. We'll talk much more about wisdom, okay? Maybe we'll get to it tonight. Not the way I talk, but so slow. Okay. So what happens, why I put grasping and clinging? Let me see what happens next. Okay. Oh, so grasping and clinging. So this is where we have to get confrontive. Okay? So, and we have to be, it's not so easy. So when you hear your daughter's voice, so actually in your daughter's voice is just really billions and zillions of atoms and molecules, right?
True.
There's no meaning in it.
Unless she has the way, you know how you inflict with your tone and all that stuff.
Even still. So tone is high, tone is low, tone is what?
Tone it's nonverbal communicate, well.
Nonverbal.
Yeah.
So how do you know on the phone if you're not?
Because...
She's just being quiet?
No, it's maybe the way she said it, or...
Oh, she might be worried. Right? That's different. That's our problem. So, when Lama Zopa Rinpoche hear, or His Holiness Dalai Lama hear that someone is having a problem, do they worry? They don't worry. So it doesn't, that's where we have to get to. So it doesn't mean they don't see the person worried or the person in pain, right? But I think from their point of view, they feel kind of not disappointed, kind of sad that person's in that emotional state. When I say sad, I mean not sad in the usual way, in a compassionate way.
Yeah, but disappointed.
Well, it is. They understand it is the human nature. So, but they don't get affected, is what I mean. So it doesn't matter the tone is this or that. It's in our hands. What happens in our mind is in our hands. That's all. Not in someone. Well, we give it to somebody else. If you didn't talk to me like that, I wouldn't get upset. Right? That's what we say. Right? That's garbage. When you think about it, there's no basis at all for that. If you didn't talk like that, I wouldn't have gotten so upset with you. Why did you take the last piece of bread anyway? You knew that I had to have some breakfast this morning. If you didn't do that, I wouldn't be so pissed off. Blame, it's not. You see the grasping? So if there's no grasping, there's no anger. I want it for me. And depending on your level of how much you want it, that's how much anger comes. So anxiety is the same thing. Exactly the same. I mean, not exactly the same. It's a different emotion. Okay? Let's go into a little more. There's dozens of ways to look at grasping with respect to anxiety. From the grosser to the more subtle. And this is the root of all problems. It's driven by ignorance. And I'm not going to get too much into this ignorance this time, or at least not at this moment. But the root mental disorder is ignorance. And you don't see that in the DSM-5. Right? You don't find it in any medical description or diagnostic description. Or any psychology, a modern psychology. But it is, from Buddhist psychology, everything comes from that. All problems arise from ignorance. That's bizarre. Okay? But one of the... Let me see what I got. I don't know my own... Yeah. Yeah. So, because of ignorance, we grasp. Grasp means to cling. Right? To cling to something. But it's like clinging to sand. Why is it like clinging to sand? So this is one angle tonight that I want to share with you. There's many, many, many angles we can look at. Let me just. So when we grasp, so one way to sort of deconstructing it. Many, many ways we can do it. But I like the most, these are very powerful, is eventually we have to get to the point where we realize that we're grasping at permanence and we're grasping at a real independent self. Don't worry about the second one right now. Okay, that's more subtle. Let's look at this. So this, everyone think about this when I mention it. But when your daughter is speaking to you, this is our example tonight, right? Yeah, we're going to use it. We're going to beat it to death.
All right.
It doesn't matter, if it's your daughter. I mean, for all of us, someone's telling us something that's upsetting, right? It's concerning. You hear about one of your parents might be ill, right? Or one of your children is ill. Someone lost their job. Someone can't find work. Millions of things, right? Hardship. So with our anxiety, what happens is, because I want to make a point that everyone tonight is going to get this, is that it's due to ignorance, nothing else. And in this case, we have lots of ignorances. Well, actually, we only have one, but it sees things wrongly in many different contexts. One of the primary contexts that it sees things wrongly is it sees things as permanent. Okay, this is very important. So permanent in this definition does not mean eternal. Generally speaking, in our culture, when we say permanent, people think of it as eternal. Like the moon is permanent. Okay? Or something like that. The moon, by the way, is impermanent. Okay. The definition of impermanent is anything that's produced. It's a fancy way of saying that anything that changes moment to moment. If it changes moment to moment, it's constantly going into production and disintegration, right? And not to get too philosophical, but this is extremely important. When we go through our life, when we go through our moment, every single instant, you looking at me, you hearing my voice, me looking at you, me hearing your voice, whatever it is. Do you realize something really weird is happening? We're seeing it all as permanent. Intellectually, okay, yeah, I know it's changing, blah, blah, blah. We're not talking intellectually. The fact is that there's nothing in our experience. Now, there are one or two things, but we'll put those aside for the moment. There's nothing in our experience, and that's true. When we experience through our five senses: our eyes, our nose, our ears, our tongue, our tactile, our smell. And then the mental sense, consciousness, sense as well, as in thoughts and dreams and that sort of thing. So our experience, you could say almost 100%, is in the nature of change, isn't it? That means impermanent. That's a synonym. And the definition, and not to bore you with definitions, that which is produced. Which means, when you hear your daughter's voice, it's something produced. It's in production and in disintegration. When you smell the coffee brewing, okay, that's this sense. It's impermanence. It seems permanent, though. We don't perceive the impermanence. Isn't that amazing? There's nothing in our experience right now, you and I are sharing together, that's actually permanent, that we're experiencing. And yet we experience every single thing as permanent. Intellectually, you go, oh yeah, I know it's changing, yeah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about intellectually. I'm talking about perceptually. It's actually amazing that we can even perceive things as permanent, because they're not. Okay? There's nothing in our field of vision or senses that's not changing right now. And when I say change, now let's go one step further. So we might say, yeah, I know this building is changing, it's going to collapse in, 50 years or whatever, right? Or it's going to rot. But that's called gross impermanence. Subtle impermanence is, we can see gross impermanence, but we can't perceive subtle impermanence. The best way is time-lapse photography. It's awesome. There's nothing, nothing, if we filmed everything and watched it with time-lapse photography, everything would be moving and changing, wouldn't it? Even the moon, if we had enough time to film it. But does anyone see the moon changing moment to moment? Do you? Does anyone see the coffee, the aroma of the coffee changing moment to moment? Sure, you say, oh, it smells good now, and then 10 minutes later, oh, I can't smell the coffee. I understand that. That's gross impermanence. If everything's can people accept that everything is changing moment to moment or not? Okay, now I have a question for you. What are the implications of not perceiving that? Yeah. That's the big one, isn't it? You grasp at something that's not really there. So let's say your daughter's voice. You're already worrying, I'm not putting you down, we're all the same, but you're already worrying about her, but the voice is gone, isn't it? And then you hang up the phone and you talk to whoever is around and said, whatever her name is, I'm so worried about her because she said this and she said that, and she can't find a job, and she's been looking for 6 months, can't find a boyfriend, and can't do it, and she's going to divorce, and blah, blah, blah. It's all gone. But now it's been recreated. So your anxiety is just based upon freezing a moment that's in change. And now you become anxious. If we get anxious about, what's another one? Someone else have another one I can beat up? Huh? No one else gets anxious?
Not being able to pay rent.
Not being able to pay rent. It's a perfect one, yeah. No, that's worth anxiety, so. So not being able to pay rent, if you think about it, which is true for all of us, right? Not being able to make your car payment, not being able to pay your mortgage, not being able to pay for your children's education, not being able to pay for the vacation you really want to take your parents on, or whatever, or not even be able to go see your parents because you're not sure you can pay for it, right? So when you can't pay your rent, when does a thought come up that leads to the worry? Is it there all the time?
Wait, what was the question?
Well, so somewhere when you think about you can't pay your rent, right? Is that when the worry comes up?
No, it's when I'm fearful.
Yeah. What happens? What happens just before you're fearful? The moment before.
I project an image.
Of what? Like what might be happening? Like you get a bill, or you get what sets it off? Because right now, are you worried in this moment? No. So right, that's how it works. So you were worried, but you have worried in the past. When you worried in the past, what was the first thing that arose that got before you're worried?
Are they going to schedule me to work?
Are they going to schedule me to work? So meaning, am I going to make enough money? Okay. So and then, are they going to schedule me to work? Is that because once a week they tell you your schedule, or how do you find out your schedule?
I don't know, once every few weeks, once every other week.
Mm-hmm. So it's really so interesting. Are they going to schedule me to work? And then that leads to not being able to worrying about paying the rent. So some point that's frozen, isn't it? There's a freezing. I'm not saying it's not scary, it's okay. But the disturbing emotion is not necessary, right? The way the disturbing emotion arises is when you, somewhere in there, I was trying to find out when the exact moment was when you had the perception. That perception seems real, doesn't it? Is it just a thought that comes up, or is it when you go into work and you see you're not on the schedule or something? When would it be produced?
The thought that I won't be on the schedule.
Mm-hmm. Or that you might not be on the schedule? Yeah.
I'm laying in bed.
When you get back?
Laying in bed.
Oh, when you're laying in bed. Perfect. And then doesn't it then spiral into this whole reality, doesn't it? And then do you get tight chest? What happens physically?
My head gets tight.
Your head gets tight, yeah. Squeezed. And then you're thinking about, God, I might not. I wonder if I should maybe I should look at that other place to work. Maybe I can double up my hours, right? Yeah. All that worry. But what's happened is only a thought. Isn't that weird? Just a thought. And the thought's way gone by now, right? It's like you might be lying in bed and it's 10 o'clock and you have the thought, and then pretty soon it's 11 o'clock and 11:30, and then you wake up in the morning and at 11:30 you take some melatonin or whatever, and then you go to sleep, and then in the morning you wake up and your stomach's kind of tight, your head's kind of tight, right? I didn't sleep very well last night. Why? I was worrying about, isn't it amazing? I was worrying about what? This cloud went across your mind, isn't it? Just a cloud. And it took over. It became solid. But where was that thought even? This is really what's really cool. Is that thought, I have a question for you. Did that thought have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Yeah. So it's impermanent, right? But you froze it. Did you freeze the beginning or the middle or the end?
Beginning in the middle.
You created, you froze it and made it something it actually wasn't, right? The thought itself is moved, it's gone like a cloud. But then our ignorance, this is not your fault. This is not anyone's fault. The ignorance does that. It freezes everything into permanent. Right? Now, mind training is unfreezing your mind. That's all. Doesn't make doesn't pay your rent. Okay? That's still something we got to handle. But it makes us healthy. Because The other thing does, like, oh, did you see Rachel? Yeah, she looked like a wreck, didn't she? Yeah, what happened? Oh, she says she's sick. She took the day off because she, wasn't feeling good today. It makes us unhealthy. Physically or mentally, That's the people might say, oh, that's not really practical. You think the other one's practical? Getting controlled by anxiety is practical? Shouldn't I be worrying about something? Anyone would worry about that. Don't believe people when they say that anymore. I think I mentioned that last class. People say, oh, they dented your car and they didn't leave a note? Yeah, you should be angry at them. It's like, okay, if you want to be unhappy, you should, right? This is about taking control. That's why it's not easy. But to be happy is so not easy. It's ridiculous. Eventually it's easy. But our stages of unlearning these habitual patterns, not easy. And you know how we're talking about, right? This is why I want to make a point here. What we're talking about right now, we're talking about looking at things. It's not, I hope it's not a dirty word. Looking at things kind of logically. Logic has been thrown out by, or regarded as something sort of non-spiritual. When I talk about spiritual, I mean developing my definition of spiritual is developing our inner qualities, our inner potential. I don't care about the religion. It's about developing this unlimited potential. And somehow people think that that's only mystical. It's not. There's a mystical part to the mind is incredibly magical. Lama Yeshe once said, he said, people think that I do magic. He said, I don't do magic. The mind is magic. And somehow people think, that's sort of the antithesis of logic. It's not on this level. Logic is powerful and it's mystical. Because the right logic means using the right intellect. Eventually you go beyond the intellect. You let the intellect, rest for a while. But you get to the mystical through logic, actually. So we have to actually develop. Our problem is we haven't developed our critical thinking enough. So we get just pulled around. What we're doing now is critical thinking. It's deconstructing our reality. Because we're victims otherwise. We're automatic. Okay, so anyone need a break or something? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Can we give a break to the people out there too? Okay. Go ahead if you have to go somewhere. Yeah. Any questions in between? I like questions. Yes.
So I know there's like the ultimate happiness, which is attaining enlightenment,
Mhm.
but temporary happiness also exists, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So
what would that look like?
So she just asked that say it again. Ultimate
Happiness is like
when you attain enlightenment. Ultimate has like the attain enlightenment, and is there relative happiness? Isn't there relative happiness too? I think what I was alluding to, becoming happier, that's the relative happiness.
But are there moments of like if we experience happiness, is that actually an instance of happiness, or is that just like bliss, or like some other?
Right. When you experience happiness, is that actual happiness or is that something else? Well, I could answer that two ways. One way could be kind of negative, and one way could be kind of positive. So until of course there's relative happiness. Because some people are just not as depressed, more positive. So yes, there is that, and definitely So we have to work on that, and that's a daily work, and that is based a lot on applying the right methods, and this kind of, being careful what we do. In fact, the other part in terms of Buddhist teachings is, most is about psychology, but about a third of the teachings are in ethics, right? So the ethics is for that exact reason you're talking about. Ethics have a way of keeping them, of helping the mind be more tame. So tamer is happiness. Yeah.
Like, let's say I really want to get a new car, and I want like a Prius.
Uh-huh.
And once I buy that car, for like that second, I'm happy.
Yeah. No.
But then afterwards, it's like, oh, now I have to pay.
Yeah. So we don't. So that's where.
Is that instant? Like,
No.
Is that just like a bliss?
No.
How would you explain?
Pleasure. Just pleasure. It's a buzz, and yeah. And we have been not just every human being, well, particularly us in this modern culture, have been recruited and hypnotized in the idea that more buzz is more happiness.
Yeah. So then.
So it's not happiness.
So then, is there such thing as relative happiness then?
Yeah, but I don't think it has to do with pleasure. Certain level of pleasure. Lama Yeshe used to say, he used to criticize us, saying that, you people just want to do a yogi trip. He says, you live in a beautiful culture, you have lots of beautiful things, enjoy them. He says, you're ridiculous, extreme for not. But he added a caveat to that. Just don't cling.
So enjoy it without attachment.
Yeah. Definitely. Otherwise, we have all this, and beauty is beauty. But the problem with us is we always then cling. So there might be a minute. Lama used to talk about how to enjoy cheesecake. It's one of his metaphors. He says you should enjoy cheesecake. It's beautiful. Just don't cling. We can't seem to do it without clinging, though. When I say that, I don't mean we're bad. It's how we've been, the mind has been trained. So it's a habit, those neural pathways. So we usually mistake that kind of pleasure, getting a new Prius, with happiness. It's not. The happiness would be more from getting the Prius. There's an appreciation of the car and a complete understanding that it's totally impermanent. Because that feeling you get with a new car, when you get your new car, I have a request. At the moment you're buying it, or when you're shopping for it, also relate to what it'll look like in 10 years and how you'll feel about it. Not just what it'll look like. We know, okay, it's the same car, but we don't have that concept. Maybe that's a buzzkill for most people. It's like, yeah. Well, it's a tool, right? It really is. And the more we think of it as an object of happiness, then we have a problem. And people say, it's so negative. Well, there's an alternative, right? The alternative is develop. There is bliss in this world. It's just not in a car. Right? Yeah.
There is a question from online.
Okay, let's wait until everyone comes here for
Okay.
it. Okay, come on back. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bill Kane is? Ah. Hi, Bill. One of my oldest friends. He lives in Thailand. I wonder if is he in Thailand now? I don't know. One of my closest, oldest friends. Yeah.
The question is do you think that anxiety is contagious? For example, in a work situation.
Do I think
Is it
anxiety is what?
contagious?
Contagious?
Yeah.
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 Is that the whole question?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's, but yes, I do think it's contagious because in the same way that, think of it this way, if you're a child growing up in an anxious house, you have a good chance that you develop an anxious style. I mean, it has to do, just scientifically, of course, talking about the neural pathways, in that, for a child, particularly children are developing, their neural pathways are much more undeveloped, and they're in the process of developing more than we are. We still develop our neural pathways, but it's a lot harder. And so, of course, they see that as style of relating to the world as an anxious style, then they will, of course, we know that from parenting and child development. On the other hand, if at the same time, I guess you could say, definitely, if you are in a culture, certain cultures seem to be more speedy and anxious ridden, right?
Like the Western culture?
Well, Western culture, and yeah, I mean, Western is a big word, but yeah, definitely if you're not careful and you hang around in those environments, right? It's very easy to become anxious like them. So, for example, the political situation, let's make it simple. When we start talking about bombing North Korea or going to war with North Korea, what do you think is happening in the country right now? There's a shared anxiety if you're not careful. And it's completely made up. It's completely just narrative. And we start hearing the narrative, participating, and we think it's real. We don't see it just as narrative. And then you deconstruct narrative, or, it just doesn't even exist the way it appears either. You can't find the narrative. But that's not how we are as human beings. Because human beings, we believe everything, actually, or disbelieve it. But the point is, we believe what's appearing in front of us as being real, as existing that way. So, of course, anyone would be worried about bombing North Korea, right? Well, I mean, you can't say that. I'm not saying it's not a concern if that happens, or, but that's the power of narrative. Okay, and it is contagious. That's my opinion, anyway. Okay, anyone else? Yes.
I'm not understanding what you were saying about ignorance. Are you talking about ignorance? Essentially, it's not good to have it, and also, are you talking about ignorance? Like the ignorance is bliss, kind of like the lack of awareness part, or the ignorant, intellectually.
Yeah. So the question was about, what do I mean by ignorance? Like ignorance is bliss, or it's good to have ignorance, or what was the last part you said?
I'm not sure when you had that slide up, you were referring to ignorance in an intellectual form?
No, it's not really an intellectual form, and I will talk about next time more than tonight. It's really important for me to just make clear. Ignorance in this context, okay, is a very specific thing. And this ignorance, in one way we could say it's not knowing. Okay, let's start with that. It's not knowing. And it's not intellectual. It's like innate. We're born with this ignorance. And this ignorance is very simple. Well, not simple. It's very simple to state. It's seeing things incorrectly. Perceiving things incorrectly. Do you know how we were talking about permanence? Why were we seeing everything as permanent when it's not? So that's due to the mental affliction or mentality of ignorance. Okay? All the problems in the universe come from that. Is that clear? So am I. It starts with intellectually understanding this. So, can I ask you a question? What would you can agree that, for just one example, is that things are in the nature of change, right? Are we in agreement on that? Okay. Do you see everything that way? Do you perceive all the change happening?
It somehow, like...
Do you see all the change happening?
Yes.
You see it now, all the molecules moving and the atoms moving and everything like that?
I don't see those molecules and atoms hour that you were talking, I can understand how.
You can understand intellectually. That's called inference, right? But you're not perceiving it unless you could be, but if you're like me, you're not perceiving it with your eyes, right? Why not? The reason we're not is because of what's called ignorance. Ignorance is a mental function that gets us to see things differently than how they are. Experiencing things differently than how they are, okay? So we don't see reality. What did Anais Nin say? We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Okay? And then Geshe Gelek, the Geshe who lives in North Carolina, says, we don't see what is there, and we do see what isn't there. Okay? Okay, so I hope that's helpful, but it takes time to learn this about ignorance.
Said ignorance is not, what was the first word that you used?
Ignorance is not knowing. Not knowing what? Not knowing how things exist. One small way that things exist, there's many things we don't know. One was that they're in a state of change. We don't see that. Another way is we see things existing independently. They don't exist that way. That's what we're going to talk about next time, I think. Does it make sense? I mean, this is the toughest topic, by the way. This is not easy. I just wanted to touch on it tonight. Okay? The reason that we all can say, yeah, I shouldn't worry about the environment, but I am. Well, don't then. Why? Why can't we just not? Because of ignorance. Habit. We don't see things correctly. But this is a longer topic, okay? So let's start there and leave it there for the moment. Now, back to anxiety for a minute. When you think about anxiety, can you put that slide up there? The 8 trivial pursuits. This is kind of a traditional topic, but I wanted to just quickly explain how I thought anxiety was so cleverly related to this. So when we're anxious, people need to really identify with their anxiety. When we become anxious, it's kind of like, I'm just going to go through the list. It's kind of like sometimes there's some unhappiness or unpleasantness that's coming. You're going to get a root canal tomorrow. You're going to go see the doctor tomorrow. Isn't that anxiety provoking for some people? Right? Because it's something unpleasant. So anxiety can arise through something unpleasant. And it's really weird how for some people it's anxiety provoking and for other people it's not. Like you got to go to a party tomorrow night. You just really don't like the people that you're going there. You find it really unpleasant because they're really boring. And then they might, last time you were there, they kind of challenged you on your beliefs about the environment or something. And you feel kind of nervous about going, you're really anxious about going, right? That's around unpleasantness. Or maybe you're anxious about getting to work tomorrow on time because you know that they're closing a lane on the freeway. And people get anxious about that. What else do they get anxious about that's unpleasant? Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes, like when you're brought up the example of the dentist,
Yeah.
it's as much about it being uncertain as unpleasant.
A lack of control.
Sometimes it's that, that uncertainty, the what ifs.
Uncertain. Yeah. Now rent. I think rent doesn't fall into this one. Worrying about your rent. It could because the unpleasant. No, I don't want to put it there, but it could because it's something unpleasant. But I think it falls into one of the other ones. What else are people anxious about? Being healthy, yeah. So it's possible that when you feel something like you're feeling like a flu coming on or something, you could get anxious, right? Or maybe I have cancer, right? Maybe this cough I've got is really, the beginning of some sort of throat cancer or something like that. I remember my friend, yeah, he had lung cancer, started with a cough. He never even smoked, right? Something unpleasant. Okay? And then, of course, the anxiety of seeking the pleasant and the happiness, because you're anxious about getting this job. Right? So just in seeking happiness, we get anxious. You're up for a promotion, and you're going to meet with your boss. And what happens? You're anxious. Kind of like success. Avoiding poverty. Okay, rent. See, these are 8 that are very common for every human being. This is what we spend our life doing, unfortunately, if we're not purposeful. So people spend their life in these 8. So people spend their life avoiding poverty, okay, or seeking wealth. Now, avoiding poverty is not the same as seeking wealth. Okay? But everyone worries about poverty. Everyone. With exception of a few people. It's like homeless people who you see as really destitute. You look really closely, like, are they mentally something wrong? Because they don't seem to be worried about poverty. It's just not a common thing to think that people seek poverty. They fear it. And not only that, but people do seek wealth. When you think about wealth, don't think about millions and billions or zillions of dollars. It's that we always seek more than what we have. We're not content. It's really weird because you start thinking, you've like your first job, you feel that's pretty good. I'm making X amount a year. That's more than most of my friends are making. Then all of a sudden you get in a relationship, or you just 5 years later, that's not enough, no matter what. You start thinking about, well, maybe I should invest some, and things like that, right? So it's about resources. We always seek resources, and that's part of the setup. You get anxious about that? I think everyone gets anxious about their wealth or poverty. Making the rent, getting a salary cut, getting laid off,
Having enough for retirement.
having enough for retirement. Wow.
Yeah.
You get your health benefits cut. That goes into your income. That's going to make you poorer. Then you might actually not be covered. Not everyone. Many people are worried about this, right? That's related to this thing. Avoiding poverty. Scary. Or avoiding the unpleasant. Unpleasant is interesting because all of these things we can make a shift to. Unpleasant is a bit subjective. Right? Some people find driving a Prius unpleasant. Some people find living in, downtown somewhere, San Jose, as unpleasant. Right? You go to a sports event. You never go to the Warriors game. You go once. And you have seats way up here, and you think, God, these are great. This is so, and you're really excited. And then the people on the floor think, those poor people up there. All right? So funny. Now, guarding against a bad reputation, seeking a good reputation. Okay, again, think of your anxiety. Think how nervous you would be. Public speaking, I think, it has to do with this one. What do you think? I don't know what it is with public speaking. Well, I get anxious sometimes too. So when I was thinking about this, when I'm anxious, what is it I'm anxious about? What am I grasping? What am I clinging to? Clinging to my, I want to make sure that I don't make a fool of myself, right? That's mostly what it is. right? So, and the other thing is, does anybody like a bad, like when you go to work and then someone says, you hear something like, yeah, I heard so-and-so really didn't like the job you did over, on that. We get so, he's really not a very good at, he thinks he's good at, but he's not really that good. You're a contractor and you get hired by somebody and then they don't refer you to anybody. You worry about it, right? That's your reputation. So this is not a small thing, reputation. It's not just a matter of fame and not fame. It has to do with our job, our credibility, everything around that, So if I say to Urs that I really wasn't happy with the way that you handled the technology, you kept being so slow on the slides. Not true, or maybe I should say it's true. I mean, you would feel something, right? Anyone would. Not Urs, he won't feel anything. He doesn't have that problem. But, you know what I mean? It's so incredible. Or someone says to you, so many things. Think about that. But think about anxiety. Can we have another anxiety thing? Anyone have another example? No one gets anxious? Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people, probably me too, are anxious about time.
Oh, punctuality.
Punctuality, Karuna, and just,
You mean time in general?
yeah,
Give me an example. If you were going to get anxious about it right now.
enough time.
Oh, wow. So you were, oh, yeah, I know there are people. Because you have a lot to do.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, when I think about overwhelm, we talk about, I feel overwhelmed. That's a kind of anxiety, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But I think people are also very anxious about punctuality.
Yeah,
And there's different concepts of,
punctuality. So let me ask you something. Have you ever seen His Holiness the Dalai Lama? Have you ever seen the Dalai Lama?
yes.
Yeah. So have you ever seen him? I mean, we're not with him all the time, but do you get a sense that he's anxious?
No.
So he's got 6 million people that regard him as their leader, something like that. He has a country that's been, oppressed for 50 years or longer, 1950 something. Yeah. He works tirelessly. He's over 80. He sleeps a few hours a night. And he wears a watch.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. Does he worry about punctuality?
Probably.
I don't think so.
Probably not.
Why not? He's meeting world leaders. He meets students. He meets Tibetan refugees. He meets everybody. Amazing amounts of celebrities. And why doesn't he worry about time? If he were to worry about time, what would have to happen?
Well, he would suffer anxiety from worrying about time. But there's also the concept that time doesn't exist.
Concept of time doesn't exist. So it's a very good example of what we were talking about earlier about clinging and grasping.
Right.
So this is an important one. So time. Primarily, does it exist other than as a concept?
No.
It's one of those things that's really conceptual. At least we can say this glass, maybe I can convince you this is only concept 2, but I won't try to right now. Okay? It's glass. I mean, it's here or something. We're experiencing this, right, with our senses. But time, you don't experience with your senses. It's only experienced with your mind. It's all conceptual. So, I'm not saying not to be punctual, but I don't know if punctuality is like something, the key to happiness either. Because when we're talking about clinging and grasping, so when the concept comes up in the mind of punctuality, whatever it is, it's seeing as fixed, frozen, and permanent, isn't it? And then the more frozen it is, the more we got to hurry, we got to hurry. We got to get there. And you really check with people who are that kind of person. We're in a hurry. Come on, what are you putting in your shoes now? Why are you doing the dishes now? Okay? Why are you stopping for gas now? Don't you know that we're supposed to be there in 5 minutes? Why are you stopping to get milk now? Okay? Why are you calling your brother now? We've got to be there in 5 minutes. Right? It's always those things. Anytime we have that question, I mean, this is not easy, but every time we have that, isn't it because we have a fixed concept, like almost like a picture floating there on our forehead, in our mind somewhere? What if you didn't have that?
Well, it would be more fluid.
It would be. You might be late. You might not be late. You know, His Holiness doesn't have that in a fixed way, and he's pretty punctual.
Right.
Lama Zopa Rinpoche doesn't have that in a fixed way, and he's pretty not punctual.
I remember Lama Yeshe too.
Lama Yeshe was punctual.
That's right.
Yeah, very much so. But Lama Yeshe also, you could have a 2-hour lunch with him, and he might, you come up for a half-hour tea and it might last 2 hours.
That's right.
It's because they don't have, either way, it's not that.
Start of things was not.
What's that?
I said the start of things was punctual.
The start was punctual, not the ending.
The end of things, not
But
necessarily.
that's right. But the point is, they're all the same in terms of they're not holding on. They have the concept, but they see it as just concept. Isn't that amazing? It's like I'm really upset with that situation, as if it's real. It's not that there isn't some reality, like as if it's real, like exists that way, but it's a concept. It's thought, and it's moving. Then we froze it. So the thing about punctuality, the other thing I've noticed about punctuality is people who are really tied to punctuality seem to think they're right.
That's right. That's true.
They're the right ones. But it's just some cultures decided that was important as a value. In Nepal, not so much. Okay, yeah, let's meet at 10. Okay, yeah, 10. Then 10:15, 10:30, 10:45 come around all the time. And I found out why. It used to frustrate me. So sometimes you'd be walking in the mountains. I don't think this is true now. It's different, of course. But those days, we go for on a trek or something, or be walking somewhere, and we say, well, how far is it to that village? The village, and they'd always, it's 2 hours. You walk. After about 2 hours, you're still not there. Someone else comes walking. Hey, how far is it to 2 hours? You walk another 20 minutes, and you're in the village. It's like, what's that about? And then I was really dumb. I mean, really stupid. When I realized they didn't have clocks. They didn't have any clocks in the mountains. Time was a new concept. And they didn't live by that. They lived by whatever, how long does it take, I don't know how they would say. And also they'd always give you an answer because it was impolite not to tell you. It would be rude not to answer. But they didn't know how long. None of them had watches. I mean, it's like, okay. Well, it took me so long to realize that. But it's different now. So anyway, the point is, so if you make a meeting, and then if you had a meeting in Nepal, I think it's still not that different, but if you meet in Nepal, you're going to make it for 10 o'clock, you're not waiting for the person to be there at 10 sharp. If they're there at 10 sharp, it's almost like a surprise, but it's just kind of like, it's a different value, a different description. So a lot of people have a description of time in a very rigid, fixed way. Some people have a definition of time in a looser way. And both are wrong, and both are both are kind of wrong because they're both based on concept that they think is real. The last one of these is getting anxiety. How about anxiety around criticism and blame? You ever have that experience? You knew you did something wrong, and people and you knew that they were gonna find out. You know what I mean? Like you did something, maybe like illegal or something. You ever? How do you sleep that night? You don't sleep very well. unless you're like a sociopath or something. You don't have that conscience. Being criticized or blamed is, some of us live our lives to avoid that, don't we? In my family, it was famous for criticizing and blame. And then seeking praise and, I guess that's supposed to say compliments, I don't know. Okay, so if someone else gets praise and then you get anxious. Am I doing a good job? Why didn't they tell me I was doing a good job? I draw just as well as they do. Why is he getting all the compliments? But you get anxious. It's not just about these. I want to draw the parallel. When you leave here tonight, I hope that you'll reflect on your anxiety as it comes. So when it comes up, you'll be more aware of it now. It's a lot more prevalent than we think. Then think about, what are these things, where in this sort of, there's one way you can look at it. What am I being anxious about? And these are called the 8 worldly dharmas, the 8 trivial pursuits. I call them trivial pursuits because this is not the way to live your life. And this is the way most people, people are taught how to live your life. This is a meaningful life. Okay? This was a while ago, one of my Silicon Valley clients, executive, when I was doing coaching with him, when I first met him, it was like, what's that? Chalk and cheese. Because here's this Buddhist guy coming over, and here's a very, very successful Silicon Valley entrepreneur, but he's extremely stressed because his company is about to go public. This was back in 1999 or 2000. And he's just dripping with anxiety. And so I always like to ask people what their philosophy is. Everyone has a philosophy, even though they might not know it. So when he knew what I meant, and he said, my philosophy is that you can have it all. Try telling that to this Buddhist therapist guy. Fresh from Nepal. So I try to be careful. So then I, over time, asked him what he meant. How do you know when you have it all? I asked him. He said, well, that's easy. He said, when you can buy your own jet, and it's not one of the jets that you can't stand up in. It's a jet that because I guess there are 2 classifications: the ones you can stand up in, and that the jet's value is no more than 10% of your net worth. And then of course, you don't ask, well, what's your net worth? You don't ask like that, right? That's a bit crude. You ask, well, how much does that jet cost? And he said, you don't lease them. You have to buy it, because he wanted to park it there with Bill Gates's and all that. And he said, they're $40 million. So I did the math. I could do the math. That's when you have it all, okay? So all of us were a little ways from that, I imagine. Over the years, I think I influenced him a little bit, and he changed. No, he is very nice, man. He did change. Pretty amazing. I brainwashed him. Okay. Anyone else? So is this anxiety thing over? Have we beat it to death? Fundamentally, it's a fear of loss of control. We talked about that earlier. Of the secure and comfortable. That's where we get anxious. You can't pay your rent. You feel you're losing your security. Might lose your security. Might lose your comfort. Okay. You might have to. I'm anxious because maybe I don't have enough funds, so I might have to sell my car. The car you really like. Doesn't matter if you don't like it. I might have to sell my house, right? That's people face that all the time, don't they? And then, in fact, last class someone was talking about that a month ago. That anxiety, that's pretty high anxiety. But if you look at it from a different point of view, it's always about losing what you're attached to. Just someone, some people might say, well, aren't you supposed to, enjoy your house? Yeah, of course. We're not talking about that. It's clinging. And what are you clinging to? Where's the house anyway? Going back to impermanence for a second. Where's the house that you can hang on? Remember the picture of the hand holding the sand? Isn't a house the same as the sand? What's the difference between that? In terms of how it exists. Isn't it just, how can you find the house when it's constantly moving? Where's the house? So, in order to get anxious, we have to freeze it and see it as permanent. But if you don't want to be anxious, see it as changing moment to moment. Same with, why do people get, anyone here anxious about dying?
No, but more fear of someone else you care about dying.
Oh, that's hard too. So, to fear someone we care about, right, dying, that raises anxiety, right? It's funny that we get anxious about that in a way, because is there anyone that doesn't die? But we feel anxious because we're not dealing with that. It's only because of our attachment, right? If you're not attached, it doesn't mean you don't care, right? But if you're not attached, are you anxious about their dying? When I say because there's nothing, we attach to something because we think it's permanent. So you hold an image of this loved one, and you're holding it as permanent. I mean, we all deal with this. Not like this is the big one, right? And so, but there was never a moment when that person wasn't changing. There was never a moment when that person actually wasn't headed to death. The moment you're born, the conclusion is dying. So it's not wrong to just be realistic about it. And some people think, oh, that's so morbid. That's not true. It's not morbid. Morbid is when my mother was clinging to my dad's feet saying, this wasn't the plan, as he was dying. That to me is morbid. That to me is suffering. Now, if she and he had somehow talked about or had the concept of impermanence, sure, it may make them some sadness. But that kind of sadness, that kind of is almost traumatic, right? It's traumatic. Those kind of traumatic experiences are not good for our brains. It makes us, there's nothing good about it. Health-wise, happiness-wise. So, I'm not sure that answers your question, but if you can love something that's in the state of change. You just don't but you can't really get attached to something that's in a state of change. Because where do you stick to? If it's moving, like smoke. Yeah, everything's just kind of like smoke. So where are you going to stick your sticker on the smoke? Or onto a cloud? And that's the reality of the other person. There is no thing you can put that sticker on and say it doesn't move. In fact, the person I love right now, whoever that person is, already, that's gone. That person doesn't exist. You're not the same person as when we started today. Are you? You've changed zillions of times. Because my ignorance, I see you as the same. But it's not true. All your molecules and your atoms have been changing, right? So you're not, there's nothing about you, actually, it's the same. There's not one thing. So where do I stick to, right? It's just a concept. What happens if you leave? Now, people think, well, if I don't have that concept, that's very sad or empty. It's not true. The absence of the clinging is contentment. And then we can begin to also. There's a whole world of existence that's more satisfying and more fulfilling than this world that we're interacting with. I'm not saying it's different, like it's not this, but the way we relate to things is very, very superficial and very, very mundane. And it's not the same way that a very, like, realized person relates to the world. They seem so much more happy, actually. So I'm not just saying, oh, it's not just like the absence, this nihilism. It's not like that. It's not nihilism. It's something, yes, we talk about shedding this ignorance, but what I don't talk about is what takes its place, which is wisdom, non-anxiety, non-hatred, non-striving. Okay? The reason we don't have this unlimited love and compassion, which we have the potential, the only reason it's not rising within us is because this other crap is rising within us. That's all. So that's why we're talking about this, okay? When the unhelpful view of permanence begins to be cut away and dissipates, then the view of impermanence arises, because that's reality. It's much, you can't compare the level of happiness between those two. Because one, the happiness is based upon a false concept. Doesn't even, okay? So I guess I should say, it's okay. Be excited. It's not just morbid. It's not just like loss. Not just loss. You'll love the person more if you're not grasping at them. That's so it's good news. Okay, it's almost 9 o'clock. Any other question? Oh, there's some.
Well, there was a question before. What's the antidote for anxiety?
The antidote for anxiety. Okay, so let me just thank you because those are still more slides. So the antidote to anxiety is we can talk about in two ways. There's temporary antidotes, which are not the antidotes that we're promoting. Do you know what I mean? I mean, medication is a temporary antidote, right? We're not promoting that. But there's some temporary antidotes that are okay to promote, as long as they're not solutions to anxiety. And let me see if I can jump. I might have to jump slides here. Yeah. Of course, the human mind. I already put this one up, right? Of course, the human mind has both positive and negative sides, but the negative is transient, very temporary. Your up and down emotions are like clouds in the sky. Beyond them, the real, basic human nature is clear and pure. So anxiety is like a cloud in the sky. We have to. That's why I'm saying don't grasp on it. So you might feel anxious about something. Don't put. When I was caring for Lama Yeshe, not long before he passed away, I was living at the time with Lama out in some remote house outside New Delhi, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche was there, and 2 other monks were attending. And I don't know. Somehow I wasn't really into chili until I was sitting having lunch one day with Rinpoche, and he passes me this hot, really hot mango chili. And I started eating it, and it like transformed the food, which was, pretty basic. I was so excited. So then we, every time we had lunch, I would be excited about this mango chili. Then one day I was coming to lunch, and I had been out shopping in Delhi. And one of Lama Yeshe's teachers had lunch there that day. And so when we went to have lunch, I passed the hot chili to Lama. This is later, a dinner probably. I passed the hot chili to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and he says, "Oh no, I don't eat that anymore." What? I said, "Rinpoche, what do you mean you don't eat that anymore?" He says, "Oh well, when Geshe Rabten Rinpoche was here today, which was one of their teachers, I passed the chili to him, and he said, this food is in the nature of suffering. So why would I put more suffering on top and burn my mouth?" So then Rinpoche took that as a really profound, I wish it was, profound teaching, and quit, why put suffering on top of suffering is the way that they talked about it. So with anxiety, yes, it arises. Don't put chili on top of it, which means we have to learn to disengage from the anxiety, Not say, go away, it's not going to be here. So here's a few temporary things, okay? So for the person who asks, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but now these are temporary. Oops, I meant to take out that long term. Temporary attitude adjustment. Intention. So you change your intention around it to feel good. In other words, the intention, anxieties are in your life, and the intention is you hate it, you're angry at it, you despise it, all those things. So just change your intention around it. Okay, that's one thing. Develop a beginner's mind, a curiosity around it. Okay, beginner's mind means you become a learner. Okay? So you have the anxiety, instead of fighting it, you go, okay, I'm going to learn from you. What can I learn from you? Okay? This happens in sports, for example, and athletic stuff, where you're trying to do something, you just can't do it. And then the idea is, well, okay, you can't do it. Don't keep trying the same old thing. What is it you need to learn? Okay? So anxiety changes in that way. Patience. Most moments of anxiousness pass. But when we're in anxiety, it's frozen in time, isn't it? It feels like an eternity. So just an attitude change is, well, this is going to pass too. It hurts. It's uncomfortable, but it will pass. The more we don't think it'll pass, we cling to it and engage with it and fight with it, the longer it lasts. It's kind of like saying, I'm sorry, yeah, you do have a cold. It's kind of like that. You do have a cold. Okay? Non-judgment. That's the chili on top of bad food. Don't put judgment on top of it. So usually anxiety makes us have a judgment about ourselves. Why do I always go to this place in my head? Why can't I just stop it? It's ridiculous. It doesn't help. I know it. Like that. We do that too, right? Non-judgment. Just try to not make the anxiety, make it a statement about your being and your quality and your, who you are. Okay? Non-striving, avoiding to get out, the need to change it. This is tough. Don't try and change it. If you're a learner and curious, you won't try and change it. Okay, because the more you try to change it, by the way, all these other things happen. It's like we're so unfamiliar with being with what's uncomfortable. We've been so taught that we don't need to be. Okay? This is the opposite teaching. You need to be in the discomfort. Sorry. Okay? Self-compassion. Yeah, it's like, I like self-compassion is like, what I often tell like clients is, what would you tell if your friend was going through what you're going through in anxiety right now? What would you tell him? Or what would you tell her? Tell that to yourself then. Okay, you're not going to tell your friend the things you tell yourself, usually. Right? You're such an idiot. There's nothing to be anxious about. God, grow up. Equanimity. So that just means try to stay, and when it says fostering balance, don't strive for balance, just stay in balance, okay? Now, what I did with these is I then thought, the method, let go. So you can always, fundamentally, where you want to go is try to just go to the breath and do just focusing on the breath without aggression, without competitiveness, don't be aggressive with it. You're not going to be able to do a very good job if anxiety is on, okay? That's not the purpose. The purpose is to start training your mind to think when you're anxious rather than going into that spin, the narrative, go to the breath. Just watch the breath in and out. Don't control the breath. Just easy going. Okay? There's more we can talk about that. And then in the Buddhist psychological approach, we talk about the approach of the method side and the approach of the wisdom side. Now you need to stop, but this person asked this. And then I got a couple different things. Okay? So I'll just mention two of them. So going back to the temporary one of intention, there's a long-term one for intention. From a temporary solution for a long-term solution. Okay, so with the temporary intention, so here's the deal. As we develop our practice, like anxiety or any other suffering, we begin to change our intention around almost, I can't say happy, but you go into I'm going to experience this so that I can be free of it forever. Okay? There's another one. I'm going to experience this. It's going to help me generate an awakened mind for which I can really help others. So I'm going to stay in it for that reason. That's the Buddhist approach, psychological approach. Or the Mahayana approach in particular. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean it's not comfortable. It means I'm here, I'm in it. It's who I am at the moment. And instead of the intention, I'm going to be free of it. I hate this. I'm going to take some, maybe I'll get high. I don't know what to do. I'll have a drink. Yeah. Or just, I'll watch my breath. No, this is something beyond. This is, I'm in it. It's my world at the moment. I'm gladly, as best I can, experience it. It's going to make me a better person in the future so that I can be a benefit to others. That's the best. It's not exactly Tonglen, but it is taking it on, yes. Okay? I'll share one or two more, just real quick. I know we're after the time. Beginner's mind. So this curiosity. But this is the long-term one. The power of learning. And this, what we talk about, just in beginner's mind of the traditional sense, is mean just be curious and like you've never experienced before. I like that. But we have to add something to it to make it more meaningful. And maybe next time we'll talk, but what we add to it is the curiosity is not just being with it, but analyzing it. And this is a whole method. I can't explain it to you all right now. But one thing you could begin to analyze is you just sit with it and you just really look. Is it permanent or impermanent? Don't answer with your intellect, because intellectually you might say, oh, it's impermanent. That's not the point. You actually are looking at each of the sides of the anxiety. And then even the person who's anxious. Is the person who's anxious? Karuna, I feel so anxious about talking to this group. Oh, that I. Is he permanent or impermanent? Or then you can look at the picture, the emotion itself, anxiety, which is it permanent? Is it moving or is it frozen? The moment you start looking, by the way, it does something really weird. It kind of disappears. And then comes back. But if you do this every time, it becomes weaker, weaker, and weaker. It's 9:05, and you can't see the other ones until next time. Okay? Any other? So those are very quick. I'll try and start early. Well, I'll try and do those earlier next time. I think people like that.
There were even more questions on Facebook that we couldn't even get to.
Oh, are there?
Very good.
Oh, I wish we could have. Can you tell me another one? Not right now. They're longish. What do we do about that?
I'm not sure. Maybe we could say next time. We already announced the next session on
Yep.
Thursday, June 29th.
Okay, Thursday when?
June 29th.
Thursday, June 29th.
And they requested what sort of topic they might be interested in. We also request you guys to think about it. Wisdom.
Yeah, so it's very, very important for me, and I think for the center here, that I want to make sure we're talking about things that are useful. If it's philosophical and that's useful, that's fine. If it's practical and that's what you want, that's fine. But I don't want to come up with the idea myself. I want people to tell us what they want. What do you want to buy? We have a great invention, but no one wants to buy it. We'd rather invent something that you want to buy. I'm sorry we didn't get to the question. I didn't realize there were that many, because I don't have that in front of me. But next time we'll just do a better job. So please, if you can comment to the center's Facebook page, or tell Margaret or Urs, please. I want to craft something that is really useful. Okay?
Thank you, Karuna.
Thank you. I'm the one that benefits most, I tell you. So, okay. So just to conclude, like we made an intention. Hey, okay, so now we're going to dedicate this energy. Dedicate means project it. I like the example of the bank account that makes so we're going to put it into a bank account that's interest bearing. And I wanted to say that what we hope will ripen from this talk we shared together is not just more like entertainment. That would be normal. This is entertaining or whatever. Or I heard something new, that's interesting. But then why don't you just make it bigger and think, number one, through this conversation, I will conquer my own anxiety for good. Even though I have more to learn about it, I'll learn it. And then you can even think that anxiety, worry, fear that's all over the world right now, it's always there anyway, but particularly now, that through my efforts in this class, I'm able to immediately soothe people's minds like a cool breeze on a warm day. Just through my efforts, everyone's mind is soothed and their worry dissipates. They're able to see the non-true existence of their fears and anxieties and worries, just like smoke, like clouds in the sky. I'm going to be the one, through these efforts, that enlightens them in this way. Okay, thank you so much.